whispering behind his back. The same system that praised his talent was quietly building his downfall. Gene was a star, but he was also a storm, wild, loud, impossible to contain. And storms don't last forever. This isn't the pretty version of his story. This isn't the sanitized Hollywood recap. This is the truth. A gifted black dancer who took over the world and then watched it collapse right under his feet. Let's start from the beginning, because once you understand where Gene came from, you'll understand why he could never escape where he was going. Gene Anthony Ray came into this world on a late spring day in Harlem, long before anyone imagined his feat would one day electrify millions. To his family, he was just Tony, the little boy who couldn't sit still, the child who turned every living room into a stage, every sidewalk into a spotlight. And even before he could tie his shoes, people could feel something in him, something sharp, something bright, something you couldn't teach. He was only a toddler when the local newspaper printed a picture of him dancing, twisting his little body with the kind of confidence grown men spend their whole lives trying to find. Nobody told him to perform. He just did. Because for Tony, movement wasn't an activity, it was instinct. It was oxygen. Harlem in those days wasn't an easy place, especially for black families trying to survive through poverty, drugs, and the constant hum of danger. But his family, loud, complicated, street-connected, saw his talent as a way out. They didn't want him following the path that swallowed too many young men around them. They kept him close, guarded him, pointed him towards something cleaner, something brighter than the corners they knew too well. As he grew older, the block parties became his first real stages. New York was a battlefield of dance crews, borough against borough, block against block, and Tony showed up ready. Girls danced the hardest back then, and he danced with them, matching their energy beat for beat. When boys teased him for rolling with the girls, he handled that too quickly, fiercely. People learned not to underestimate the pretty boy with the braids and the smile. He wasn't soft, he wasn't scared, he was built from Harlem steel. Dance wasn't the only thing that made him stand out. He had a presence wild, unpredictable, magnetic. If he walked into a room, everyone felt it. If he stepped on a dance floor, everyone moved back. And deep down, even before Hollywood came calling, he already believed he was meant for something bigger than the blocks he grew up on. School was never his safe place. He got accepted into the School of Performing Arts, the same one later portrayed in the film Fame, but he didn't last long. Anger, frustration, explosions. He didn't have the discipline for classrooms or rules. Debbie Allen would later say he slapped a teacher. Whether or not that's true, what is true is this. Gene didn't fit institutions. He fit stages. Then came the audition, or rather, the audition he missed. Thousands of kids lined up for the chance to appear in Hot Lunch, the film that would later be renamed Fame. Gene wasn't there. But fate has a way of circling back. A few days later, his friends who had been cast told him to show up anyway. Just come. Just try. Just dance. He skipped school, walked into that studio, and changed the entire trajectory of his life. He didn't want a lead role, he only wanted to dance in the background. But when the producers saw him read the lines, when they watched him move, when they looked into the raw electricity in his eyes, they threw out their plans and handed him the role meant for someone else. Leroy Johnson wasn't written for Gene Anthony Ray. Gene Anthony Ray created him, and Hollywood had just met a force it could not control. When Fame finally hit the theaters, Gene didn't just become famous, he became inevitable. The moment he stepped into frame as Leroy Johnson, audiences felt something they had never seen before. A black kid from Harlem who danced with the kind of honesty that could not be choreographed. He wasn't polished. He wasn't restrained. He wasn't shaped into Hollywood's idea of perfection. He was real raw, a spark straight from the street. And America couldn't look away. Teenagers flooded theaters. Girls screamed his name. Boys tried to copy his moves, only to learn that the rhythm in his body wasn't imitation material, it was gift. When the film was turned into a television series, Gene was one of the few actors the producers refused to let go. He was the pulse of the show, the one character who made Fame more than just scripted drama. He made it dangerous. He made it alive. The cast moved to Los Angeles to film, and for a young man who had never left Harlem, the shift felt surreal bright lights, sets built like cities, crowds waiting outside the studio gates. When the show premiered, it landed right in the center of America's prime television lineup. But the shock wasn't in how well the show performed in the States, it was how violently it exploded overseas. In the United Kingdom, the cast stepped off the plane into full-blown hysteria. Reporters compared the crowds to the early days of the Beatles. Gene couldn't walk down the street without being swarmed. He wasn't just a dancer anymore. He was a sex symbol, a fashion icon, a face plastered on posters in bedrooms across continents. Fan letters poured in thousands upon thousands every single day. He had to hire 2 secretaries just to open them. But success is never a clean blessing. Behind the scenes, his wild energy, the same energy that made him brilliant, began to worry the people in charge. Debbie Allen adored him, but even she had to confront him when he crossed lines. His temper flared often. Directors avoided him when they could. And fame magnified everything. The highs, the lows, the insecurities, the rumors. People whispered about his sexuality. They dissected his mannerisms. They tried to place him in boxes he refused to enter. Gene didn't feel to himself for anyone. That was both his beauty and his curse. And then came the moment that cracked his world open. NBC cancelled the show after only 2 seasons, even though millions overseas were still watching. MGM swooped in to syndicate the series, extending its life, but the damage inside Gene had already begun. He was making money, but not the kind of money people assumed. The cast wasn't paid like stars. They were paid like workers, just enough to maintain, not enough to escape the gravity of their lives. And the world he left behind in Harlem hadn't disappeared. His family got caught in a massive drug investigation. His mother, the woman he loved more than anything, was arrested. His grandmother, his aunts, his uncles. A house he bought for them in a predominantly white neighborhood was burned down, gasoline scent still lingering when firefighters arrived. For Gene, it wasn't just scandal. It was heartbreak, humiliation, a reminder that no matter how far he danced, the street still had a hand wrapped around his ankle. And slowly, quietly, the shine that once lifted him began to bleed into something darker. Drinking, partying, missed call times, missed rehearsals, missed chances. The boy who once outran every expectation was now beginning to outrun himself. And the world he fought so hard to impress was starting to notice. It didn't happen all at once. The fall, with Gene, came quietly at first, like a dancer losing balance by just a fraction of an inch. But in Hollywood, a fraction is enough to send you crashing hard. After fame reached its peak overseas, the pressure around him tightened. Fans wanted more. Producers wanted control. Reporters wanted access. And Gene, he just wanted peace. But peace wasn't something he had ever known. Not in Harlem, not on set, not in the spotlight, not even at home. The first blow came when NBC decided to cancel the show after only a couple seasons. For the cast, it was business. For Gene, it was personal. That show had lifted him out of Harlem. That show had given him identity, purpose, escape. Watching it slip into syndication felt like watching someone quietly turn off the lights in a room he wasn't ready to leave. But the real darkness waited for him back home. His family, the same family that protected him, carried him to dance battles, kept him away from street trouble, became the center of a major drug investigation. His mother was arrested for selling heroin and cocaine to undercover officers. His grandmother was found holding cocaine and a loaded pistol. Aunts, uncles, cousins. It felt like his entire foundation collapsed at once. Gene stood in every courtroom, every hearing, refusing to abandon the woman who raised him. But every headline cut him deeper. Fame star's family involved in drug ring. Harlem dancer tied to narcotics bust. He was never charged, never implicated, but shame doesn't care about innocence. It sticks to you anyway. To make things worse, the house he bought in a white neighborhood, his proudest accomplishment, was burned to the ground, every wall touched by gasoline. Firefighters suspected arson. Neighbors whispered about race. Gene never forgot that smell. It was the scent of America, reminding him exactly where he stood. And that's when the spiral began. He started drinking more, started using, started arriving late to rehearsals when he arrived at all. Some days he'd vanish completely, and other days he'd storm onto the set like nothing happened, expecting everyone to fall back in line. But Hollywood doesn't wait for anyone, not even the brightest dancer in the room. Producers suspended him first, a warning shot, but Gene didn't hear it. Or maybe he heard it and didn't care. Then came the final blow. He was fired. Not kindly. He was removed from the show he built, the role he made iconic, the one place where the world saw him as more than just another black boy from Harlem. After that, the self-destruction took shape. Gene locked himself inside his apartment, eating junk food for months. He looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the man staring back. Not the body, not the eyes, not the spirit. His pant size no longer fit. His career no longer fit. His life no longer fit. And so he ran from Hollywood, from America, from the pressure, from himself. Italy, England, back alleys, park benches, fights, bars, headlines, rumors, loneliness, silence. It was no longer the boy who danced like he owned the world. It was a man trying to escape the wreckage of everything he once dreamed of becoming. And underneath it all, quiet, heavy, was the truth. He finally admitted. He was HIV positive, losing control, and running out of time. When America finally learned the truth about Gene Anthony Ray's decline, the public reaction was a strange mix of shock, sadness, and silence. Because for years, people only saw the dancer, the star, the boy spinning across classrooms in fame. They saw the cornrows, the sweat, the high kicks, the impossible energy. They saw Leroy, not Gene. But when the curtain fell, what remained was a much deeper story, one that reflected the reality of being young, gifted, black, and unprotected in an industry built for consumption, not compassion. Across the country, especially in black communities, his downfall felt painfully familiar. People understood the weight of carrying a family that was fighting its own battles. They understood the pressure of being the one who made it, the one expected to lift everyone else up while trying not to drown. They understood how trauma travels from burned houses to broken trust to the loud, hungry silence of loneliness. Older dancers, those who fought for space long before social media celebrated inclusivity, saw something else. A reminder of how often black dancers are undervalued, underpaid, and overlooked once their shine fades. Gene wasn't treated like a pioneer, not by Hollywood, not by the industry, not even by history. He was treated like a moment, bright, intense, temporary, and that hurt more people than he ever knew. The AIDS crisis added an even sharper edge to his story. That era carried fear, misinformation, and stigma, especially against black performers and queer performers. When his diagnosis became known, some people whispered, some judged, many stayed silent. And silence is often the cruelest response of all. It erases. It isolates. It kills long before the illness does. But in Harlem, in dance studios, in living rooms where old reruns of Fame still play, people held on to something truer. Gene was a pioneer, a blueprint, a reminder that masculinity could bend without breaking, that dance could be fierce and feminine at the same time, that a black boy could stand center stage and make the world move with him. He inspired kids who never saw themselves in ballet shoes. He showed them they didn't have to shrink or harden to survive. They could dance. They could feel. They could take up space proudly, loudly, defiantly. And yes, his story is tragic. Yes, it is heavy. But tragedy doesn't erase impact. If anything, it makes the impact clearer. Gene Anthony Ray didn't just change a show. He changed a generation. He proved that talent born in the streets is still talent. He proved that authenticity has value, even when institutions reject it. He proved that being different is not a weakness, it's a weapon. And in the end, even though his life was short, his imprint was deep. Some stars fade when they die. Gene's didn't. It simply moved from the stage to the hearts of the people who needed him the most. Some lives burned fast, bright, and far too briefly, and Gene Anthony Ray's life was one of them. He came from Harlem with nothing but instinct, rhythm, and a kind of truth you can't rehearse. And for a moment, the world finally looked at a young black dancer and didn't try to dim him, it let him shine. He didn't dance to impress, he danced to survive. He danced because movement was the one language nobody could twist or take from him. But brilliance doesn't shield you from pain, and talent doesn't protect you from being human. Gene carried the weight of expectations, the burden of fame, and the wounds of a boy who never got the chance to grow up quietly. The industry loved him loudly and abandoned him quietly, the way it often does with black artists who don't fit the mold. Yet, even in the darkest moments, the truth of who he was never faded. A pioneer, a spark, a reminder that beauty can grow in the hardest places. Some stories end without resolution, but dignity doesn't require a perfect ending. And Gene had dignity in the way he moved, the way he fought, the way he expressed joy, even when life gave him none. His legacy isn't measured by the years he lived, but by the doors he kicked open for the dancers who followed, kids who finally saw themselves in a spotlight. Young men who realized they could be powerful and graceful at the same time. Black boys who understood that their bodies weren't cages, they were instruments. To anyone out there who has ever felt unseen or unprotected, Gene's story offers this quiet truth. Your art matters even when your world feels broken. Your voice matters even when you think no one is listening. And your presence matters, especially when you feel alone. He may have left this world early, but he left it changed. If his story touched you, let it live in your memory. Pass it on. Carry the lesson. Hold the rhythm. Because somewhere in Harlem, a kid is still dreaming with the same fire Gene once carried. And maybe his courage, his wild, beautiful courage, is exactly what they need. Rest in power, Gene Anthony Ray. And to those still searching for your own spotlight, keep moving. The world is bigger than your fears, and brighter than your past. Let's cut straight to it. There are some people who don't just walk into fame, they detonate. And Gene Anthony Ray was one of them. Before Hollywood learned his name, before the world screamed Leroy Johnson, before fame became a phenomenon, there was a skinny kid in Harlem who danced like the ground owed him respect. A kid who didn't take ballet, didn't take jazz, didn't take a single formal lesson because he didn't need them. Rhythm lived in him. Fire lived in him. And trouble lived all around him. He came from a family the streets knew by name. He grew up fighting sometimes because he had to, sometimes because he wanted to. And by the time opportunity came, he didn't just seize it. He broke it open. But here's the truth, they never told you. Hollywood didn't know what to do with a black boy like that. Too rough. Too real. Too brilliant. Too uncontrollable. So they labeled him the illiterate ghetto dancer, the stereotype they felt safe with, even when he was smarter, sharper, and more aware than anyone dared to admit. And while America cheered for him on Thursday nights, his real life was burning literally. A new house torched in a white neighborhood. His entire family swallowed by a drug bust. Producers terrified of his temper. Directors